Council meeting of May 30th, 2024. Thank you for coming, and if you would please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Sandy, could we have a roll call, please?
Councilmember King.
Here.
Shippers.
Here.
Ingalls.
Here.
Ellenboss.
Present.
Mayor Folkins.
Here. At this time, if someone would entertain a motion to approve the agenda as it's been presented.
I'd make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
That's the agenda.
Approve the agenda as presented.
Support.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ellenboss.
Yes.
Ingalls.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Shippers.
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries. This time, we'll open the floor for our first public comment. We do ask if you come forward, if you would state your name and then write your name and address for the clerk. That would be very much appreciated. And also, please keeping your comments to 3 minutes or less.
I'll do it even though it looks like you have it covered, what I was going to talk about, which is fine, but being a former teacher, I've got to talk anyway. So, yeah, I was going to say when my daughter, Bruce Loper, it's right here on the paper. When my daughter was hired as a city manager, they didn't have an enforcement officer either. And so she took it on herself to do that. And at first it took her quite a bit of time, even though sometimes she would grab a zoning administrator or anybody that she needed, and she would go look at problems and stuff. And at first it took up a lot of her time and stuff, but as the community got used to their zoning and stuff being enforced, it took up less and less of her time and stuff. So that's really all I wanted to say, but it looks like you have it covered now, so thank you.
John, sorry, 201 Iroquois. I wanted to give a little history of blight prevention in Cadillac. When I started with the city in 1980, the worst blight complaints were regarding rental housing, building maintenance, vacant buildings, tall grass, junk cars, and backyard mechanics. I was assigned the duties of assistant assessor, building inspector, building official, planner, mechanical inspector, zoning administrator, floodplain manager, soil erosion equipment officer, health and safety coordinator, and nuisance enforcement. So I had lots to do. We started with blight prevention for rental housing, or attacking blight prevention for rental housing by adopting a rental housing ordinance and starting a landlords association. We had the Cadillac Fire Department routinely inspect each of our nearly 1,000 rentals to ensure compliance with the state-approved property maintenance code. We condemned and demolished nearly 100 houses in 10 years. When you adopt a code, you often adopt a family of codes. The city code is large and adopts many other codes, such as the motor vehicle code and building codes. I've had assistance over the years from Brian Sheldon, Al DeMond, Corey Christians, and Pam Clifton. We even hired summer help to ride bicycles around looking for violations like messy yards, tall grass, abandoned refrigerators, junk cars, and vacant buildings. They prepared the violation notice and I signed it. After 2 letters from me and a visit, it was then sent to the city attorney. Most violations were resolved without going to court. I think the Airbnb problem can easily be resolved by requiring a special land use permit and using the current definitions in our code for tourist home and tourist cabin. Any desired requirement you want for Airbnbs could easily be added to the special land use ordinance. And Steve King could verify how well I knew the ordinance and enforced it at the time. He was our city attorney. Oh, my last recommendation, if you've already got it covered, make sure you get a code enforcement officer that can write appearance tickets.
Thank you.
Rick Torres. I live at 113 Otsego Place. I'm just trying to figure out where we're still dinking around with this. It's somewhat frustrating. Last council meeting, I felt your frustration. I'm referring to what Councilmember King said, and I don't get it. The question comes to mind in my mind: what is preventing us from putting a penalty that is the kind of penalty that's needed for short-term rentals? A $50 penalty, as our city attorney explained to me, it isn't going to cut it. $50 is nothing to these people. They're making $400 or $500 a night or more. It's easy to do. I don't know why. Well, we're here over a year later, and it still hasn't happened. Is someone holding a thumb over somebody in our council or in our city that's preventing us from acting on an ordinance that should be simple to make an amendment to from the planning commission that would be referred to the city council, which would then enact it? It's not hard. It can be done in an afternoon. And yet here we are, over a year later, still fumbling the ball. Not sure who's going to do it, what's going to do it. The penalty has to be one that's going to hurt. As I said, put some teeth in the ordinance. I see you got a new code enforcement officer. I hope that is the case, officer, that she can write appearance tickets, whatever necessary might be to make it happen. But there has to be a penalty. If it's in the ordinance, it's not supposed to happen, it shouldn't be happening. And yet it's still happening. So, distrust? Yes. Totally agree. Unsatisfied with the communication. It's not happening to the people. The people are wondering what's going on. This isn't a difficult task, but yet we're making it one. It should be as simple as I said, Planning Commission recommending an ordinance code violation fee, instilling it, making it happen on a movement by the council, and give it some teeth, as I said. An injunction after a first, come on. This thing can't fall into the same things as a blight ordinance. This has to be a separate thing with its own, with teeth, penalty that's going to hurt these people that are doing it if they want to continue to define what we have written. It's got to happen. Frustrated that it hasn't yet, and here I am a year later, over a year later,
Thank you.
still going at it. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no one else, we'll go ahead and close public comment and move to the approval of the consent agenda, which is the minutes from the regular meeting that was held on May 20th, 2024.
Okay. I make a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
I'm sorry. What? You're right.
I'll stand by what I said.
Yes.
You guys drinking water? Support. That's all I
I think
drink.
we're going to have to separate these two.
Sorry.
Can I get a second?
Support.
Thank you.
Councilmember Ingalls.
Yes.
King.
Yes.
Shippers.
Yes.
Alabas.
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries. Okay, at this time, we'll turn it over to staff for the code enforcement presentation.
Thank you, Mayor, and members of the City Council. Just give me a second here to move my spot, if you would. Sandy, did we get the...
Yep.
Okay. Owen, can this go in the chair, or is it gonna? That's hers.
My microphone.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. Well, good evening again, Mayor, members of the City Council. You guys hear me okay? Okay, super. Thank you. Appreciate this opportunity tonight. Going to do a much deeper dive than what I did last week during the regular City Council meeting regarding code enforcement. As I kind of segue into the presentation itself, going to start with the very first topic. As you can see, there's about, I think, 6 or 7 on my list. The very first one is accountability. In short, and I apologize if I come off sort of rough around the edges. I've been working on this until kind of the last minute here. But in short, I take responsibility. I am the responsible party. I am your city manager. And accountability is a topic, a very important topic that was brought up in our meeting last week and brought up to me on the phone when having conversations with several of you offline as well. And I take it very seriously. I need to be accountable not only to my staff, to myself, to my city council, and to the community. Concerns have been brought to my attention regarding specifically how a member of my executive staff communicates, not just in style, but also in the messaging itself between appointed boards, such as the Planning Commission, in addition to our customers or clients. Whether you're a resident, whether you are a property owner or a developer, the way I see people is they're our customers. We are a service-oriented business. And also brought to my attention about how he then is portrayed in the media. I can say that whether or not there have been miscommunications, misunderstandings, simply inaccurate information communicated, or even a combination of all of the above, a perception of what is being said can very easily become reality and absolutely lead to a breakdown of trust and respect. And, I can say certainly after our last meeting, I agree. I feel like that's where we're at and trying to make things better. I can also say publicly, I've addressed this matter with my team member. I've counseled him. And as stated, expressed how we all need to be accountable to each other. And while no one is perfect, he certainly understands that the issues that we work on are at times very sensitive, and how we communicate has to be spot on. Because if it's not, things can go south really quick. None of us, starting with me, are perfect. We certainly all strive to do what we can for our organization and community, because honestly, we're all here for the same reason. We're all here because we love this community and because we want to serve this community. We want to move it forward. We want to be excellent and professional public servants in whatever our role is, whether that's elected, appointed, or your professional staff. That vision, those goals, they're the same. I apologize that the charts and whatnot might be a little bit difficult to see, but I took a stab at using a template online just to create a little bit of an organizational chart, at least as it now starts to focus more on tonight's presentation. And looking forward, I'm obviously going to get into greater details about our code enforcement program. This is something that, going back to our goal setting and budgeting work sessions, code enforcement was one of what I would say a key discussion topic. And city council, frankly, was very candid and said, tell us what you need to bolster this program. Tell us what you need to make a difference. And this is, of course, just for the general public's understanding for our fiscal year 25 budget. Tell us what you need to make things better. So what you're going to hear from me, tonight is going to be about essentially a revamped, remodeled program. Sorry, my eye was itching. That shifts, frankly, to a much more robust system, much more proactive code enforcement system versus, what we have had for a number of years. The introduction of this code enforcement team is going to identify, the staff members directly involved and delineates what their roles are. And so with that, this next slide is just a snapshot, again, because when I progress through, and I believe the handouts actually get into the sort of contact sheets for each member, but as I get through it, it's going to be a little difficult to see on the screens. But first, I would like to invite Juanita Avila up, please, if you would, and come stand next to me. Thank you. You were here pretty quick. I didn't even get through my paper shuffling. Well, we didn't rehearse. We didn't have a chance to rehearse. So. Sorry. Juanita has been with the city full-time since July of 2017. And, we or I often talk about how we wear many hats. Juanita is possibly one of the best examples of somebody that wears multiple hats, serving a role in an administrative function with Department of Public Works as an administrative assistant, acting as our events coordinator and scheduler, working on, everything from filling the calendar at the marketplace to the pavilion to anytime anybody is putting any kind of an event on. Juanita is the point of contact with that. Juanita has been trained and lean certified to work in the police department and serves as our police clerk as well, and backs up the administration office in the police lobby when the full-time clerk is not there, whether it's on lunches or whatnot. And on top of all of that, Juanita has been serving a role as our code enforcer. That is in the process of changing. Juanita will have all of those responsibilities essentially stripped away, absent those regarding the police department, and become a full-time code enforcer, something that this city has not had in quite a number of years. And without derailing too much my introductions, just to give a little background context, we had a full-time code enforcer that retired, worked in the police department. When that person retired, we then diversified those responsibilities between multiple departments and converted that civilian job to another police officer job. They have another officer on the road that then allowed us to take an officer and make them a full-time detective, which is an off of the road or an off of patrol position. And we were able to do that being fiscally conservative without necessarily adding too much into our overall budgeting expenses. And, honestly, it's not good enough. And that's one of the reasons why we're here today, to try to make it better. So and please understand that these sheets, and we made copies for the audience as well, this shouldn't be looked at as it's 100% written in stone. This can change. These are primary examples of functions and duties. And I don't necessarily think I need to go through and read every single word in the benefit of time and in respect of all of your time being here on this special evening. But I think it's important to understand that, in partnership with other departments, whether that's Public Works, police, community development, you're going to be kind of leading up the charge, specifically when it comes to blight issues. Blight issues are, lawn and weeds, trash in yards, inoperable vehicles, which we all know is a very annoying issue that certainly takes down the value of our property, and it's something that we wish we didn't have to deal with, but we do. You'll be partnering with our fire marshal on international property maintenance code issues and frankly other code enforcement issues as needed. And so I'm very happy and proud again to announce Juanita in this new role that we're transitioning you into, and would like you at this point to please sit down. And don't go far though, but please sit down. And I'm looking for Anthony Wolf. This looks like
He's here.
Anthony, thank you for coming. Anthony Wolf. Anthony Wolf is our fire marshal. Been with us since March of 2013. And whether it's really publicly known or not, while the fire marshal certainly helps with all things fire related, the position is also an enforcement related position as well. Primarily working with violations within the property maintenance code. Anthony Wolf, our fire marshal, also is my direct staff contact, managing the contract with Associated Government Services, which is the company that the city has working on our behalf as our chief building official, chief building officer. Anthony also serves as the staff liaison, and forgive me if I butcher the name of the board. It only meets on an as-needed basis, but it's the Construction Board of Appeals?
Yeah, Construction Code Board of Appeals.
Yeah, thank you. Construction Code Board of Appeals. In fact, is John Sari still on that board?
He is.
John Sari is still on that board? Chairman, there you go.
And
Thank
that
you.
board is not just construction, it's property maintenance, it's fire, it's all of our appeals.
Right. And so, one of the things that I was remiss to say is that part of the overall plan with this is to develop metrics that can get reported out, not just to city council, planning commission, or frankly, just publicly, anyone of interest, and to try to be able to do that on a quarterly basis. And looking at, Anthony's contact sheet as reference, it does not have nearly all of the things that are on the full-time code enforcer officer sheet, and so it popped out to me, which is about the reporting and performance metrics. So as a for instance, being able to report on the condemnation process, which is something that Anthony's office is also heavily involved in, is something that we're going to, along with many other things, try to be a lot more communicative about and a lot more transparent about. So not just this body, but so the public understands, hey, here's what's going on in the community. Numbers might be high, the numbers might be low, but nevertheless, we want to make sure that that we're actively communicating what's happening on a regular basis. Not sure if there's anything else for me to add?
No.
No?
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you. Don't go far. Whoop. I'll lose my stuff. Danielle Timmer is not here with us tonight. She is at the welcoming reception. We happen to be hosting the statewide Connecting Entrepreneurial Communities Conference this evening. And Danielle is the city representative that is there. She is our community development coordinator and has really taken on quite a large role rather quickly, especially given the staffing shortages that we have. Our community development specialist, Abigail Pluger, has been on FMLA and recently just had a baby, and so has been out of the office for quite a bit of time, so we have been somewhat short-staffed. Danielle, though, has been with us since September of 2017. She works directly under our community development director, John Wallace, and is essentially going to provide support however and whenever needed. Right now, working on the coordination of the rental certificate program. Again, it's a program that straddles multiple departments. It's both the fire department and it's community development. Community development helps with the scheduling and making sure that the fire folks get out there, do the inspections, kind of track where things are at. And that's why if you look at some of the metrics that are down below, it talks about, number of rental registrations, inspections, certificates issued. They also work hand in hand with Associated Government Services. Again, those are the folks that do our building inspections, and we're looking to be able to report again on a more regular basis building code violations and cases that we're working on, as well as those being resolved. Danielle is a staff member that is also has access to the C-Click Fix program, so she can get in there and keep track of what's being submitted and making sure that proper follow-up, especially with some of the cone of influence or cone of expertise that she has, is happening accordingly. The next member of the code enforcement team is Abigail Pluger, who is our community development specialist. Abigail has been working with us full-time since February 2020. She actually had a stint with us for a little bit as an intern. Was she part-time too, Owen, or was she just
Part-time as an intern.
part-time? Yeah, part-time as an intern quite a number of years ago. Went away and then came back and again is growing into this role. And Abigail primarily is going to really be serving as a zoning administrator for the city. She's going to be taking on, once she gets back and gets reacclimated, being the staff liaison to the Zoning Board of Appeals. She works under John Wallace, our development director, and the code enforcement duties that Abigail is going to be responsible for, are going to include interpreting the zoning code, reporting and following up on violations as they occur. We use, and I think City Council is familiar with the name of the software, BSNA. We use BSNA in a reporting module that they have, so it doesn't do just like our finance stuff. It also does inspections and other types of things and violations. And she'll be intimately involved using that software again as a tool to help keep everybody accountable and managing the process. Similarly, she also will have access to the C-Click Fix reporting software. That's what we did a quick demo on at your meeting last week, where we showed how you can put a report in. She'll be responsible. Short-term rental, I realize, is a very sensitive topic. She's going to be responsible for trying to monitor that process as well, checking online for potential short-term rental activities, follow up with legal as necessary. And I'm going to talk a lot more about that a little bit later on, so please don't think I'm just brushing it off, just doing staff introductions at the moment here. And you can see, again, the types of examples of reporting, and performance metrics that we're going to try to have her part of this whole operation be responsible and report on. Zoning code violations, enforcement cases initiated and closed, signs removed, potential short-term rental units identified, enforcement cases that end up going to legal, and what their disposition is. John Wallace, would you please step up? Thank you, John. So John Wallace has been with us since 2015, April of 15. He is our community development director. And so in terms of that function of the city or that department, John is sitting behind the big desk for it, and has certainly had a lengthy career getting him up to this point, about 40 years. Give or take a year or two, maybe.
42, 43.
Who's counting, right? John is involved working with not just public boards like the Planning Commission, but even though, as I mentioned, we have other staff liaisons to the Zoning Board or Historic District Commission. Ultimately, John is involved intimately with those bodies. He also serves as our Downtown Development Authority Director, the staff liaison on the Cadillac West Corridor Improvement Authority, among others. And so, city managers are sort of commonly characterized as, a jack of all trades, and a master of none. And, I haven't quite figured out how to say this. So John is a master of several, but also a jack of all trades. Doesn't make John like a robot or, Mr. Perfect. However, people that are in John's role, and John himself, have to be able to walk, talk, and chew gum at the same time when it comes to reviewing site plans and, meeting with prospective developments, especially when they're talking about, hey, can we put, X and Y spot in this area? Well, does that area allow for that use? If it doesn't, what's the workaround? Is there a workaround? Can you get a variance? Is the building too big? Is it too tall? Is it too wide? How can we work on trying to fit that, on a site? And that's just one example of some of the work that goes on behind the scenes. I can say that we often go through those exercises for projects that never see the light of day, and sometimes we have deadlines that are incredibly tight. But John, in a sense, in his department, oversees that type activity. In addition to really also helping us with our grant writing. I was a part of a panel, conversation earlier this afternoon in the CEC conference, talking about, how the city's investment in creating the placemaking area of Cadillac Commons resulted in approximately a $35 million estimate of private investment over. Do you remember what the period of time was?
5 years.
Over a 5-year period of time. And so, the whole placemaking, place plans thing came from grant writing that germinated out of the community development department. So ultimately, as I introduced John, and I know everybody here knows John, Abigail and Danielle are direct reports to John. Okay. Please sit down. And last but not least, I'd like to bring up Adam Atjepka.
Mayor, council members.
So, hi.
Hello.
Adam Atjepka has been with the city since August of 2018, and it's kind of goofy when I see that date, because honestly it feels like just the other day that we were sharing chicken salad at the El Dorado, trying to figure out whether or not it was going to be the right fit type of meeting after he went through civil service. But I think that's part of what COVID does. It shrinks time. But Adam is our public safety director. Adam, before being a public safety director, used to be a police officer in command staff, and before that, he actually used to be a firefighter. And not to go down a complete rabbit hole in its entirety right now, but as City Council understands, we have a director that oversees the operations of our police operations and our fire operations versus having a police chief and a fire chief. And so Adam is that director, has expertise and experience in both disciplines, and also as such is going to be the direct report for our code enforcement officer. The code enforcement officer position will be a position within the police department, very similar in nature of the prior code enforcement officer position from years ago. That position directly reported at the time to the public safety director that we had at that point in time. Adam has already been involved in a whole litany of different code enforcement related issues and discussions, ranging from short-term rentals to, frankly, use of Lake Cadillac, to sidewalk issues, graffiti issues, blight issues, the gamut. He, like the rest of our staff, understand that these issues, even though it might seem black and white and clear that it could be under just one cone, they oftentimes straddle many departments. And so Adam rounds off the team, and I'm going to move on to the next segment. So thank you. I appreciate that. And I forgot to click through, which doesn't matter because you're not going to be able to read that anyhow. But everybody has a copy of it. And we can get this thing online as well. It literally got finished shortly before this meeting. So, okay. Operational enforcement process diagrams. There are a lot of codes that we enforce, and we would be here for quite a while if we were to map out every single process for every single code. But looking at what I think are probably the 5 biggest categories: short-term rentals, zoning code violations, inoperable vehicles, lawn and weed, and blight. We met as a team and created essentially a flow chart or flow charts to communicate in a graphic way what we do behind the scenes. And again, it's important to understand that every code enforcement situation might be different. There might be areas where there's different discretion used. There might be, a whole different background context behind any certain case that results in us going, instead of going through and sending out a letter and then sending out a second letter and a ticket, we might go right to, if this isn't fixed by tomorrow, you're getting sued type of thing, okay? So this is, tonight, an example of, in sort of an ideal situation where we're not talking necessarily about repeat offenders and other things, trying to map out how these processes work. Let's see how this looks. All right, so again, kind of worthless, but at least I hit the switch. So if you guys have this document, I would say please flip to it. Again, I'm going to try my best not to read everything through. But basically, this is, chapter 6 of our zoning, chapter 46 of the zoning code is where you'll find short-term rental complaints being codified or documented. Responsible staff, the boots on the ground staff is, community development specialist and coordinator, which is Abigail Pluger and Danielle Timmer. What are the potential sources? How are we going to find out about this? Well, those people are going to be, monitoring designated websites that we know list short-term rentals. We might get phone calls. We might get C-click fixes. We might get people walking into the front counter. They might, be driving, down the road one day and notice something that looks like, hey, this is a property that is on our radar that looks like we're having an issue with. Which, by the way, as a sort of total aside, yesterday I did send out our development director, along with a police officer as a civil standby, to a house on Pine Street. Nobody was home at the time, but this was after we've now sent three letters from Foster Swift to try and get compliance. And so sent them out with the intent of interviewing. Nobody was there. Doesn't mean that nothing's happening there. Just means nobody was there at the time, and we'll certainly try again to see if we can have interaction with somebody at that house. But back to the diagram. Complaint is received. What's the next step? And you'll find that this process is going to be somewhat similar. Next step is to investigate the complaint. Is there evidence? Obviously, if there's nothing, if we can't find anything, then you'll see the arrow goes to stop. We're done. If there is something, even if it may not be evidence in terms of something valid for a court of law, in this instance, if there is something, pictures, somebody that's at the house that we believe is not a proper resident or tenant in some way, that will initiate with this particular issue, as we've done about 11 times, Laura, I think, 11 or 12 times over with different properties. A letter on our attorney's letterhead to the owner of record, explaining to them how their house is in a prohibited zone for this type of use and activity, and that they immediately need to cease and desist. If they comply with that, which would mean that we go back and check, and there's nothing online, there's no active issues happening at that property, then again it stops. If it doesn't stop, and we have to take it again to another step, what we are saying here is that we're going to go back to legal, and similar to what we did off of Sunnyside, initiate a process with city council to get authorization for further legal proceedings, which likely would be in the form of some form of a lawsuit.
Marcus, can I just ask a question? City
Yeah, sure.
council doesn't do enforcement, so why would the city manager have to come to us to ask for enforcement? That's a management job.
So that was actually my suggestion, because before filing a circuit court lawsuit, we are more comfortable having city council approval. If city council wants to give us blanket authorizations to file circuit court lawsuits without, then I suppose city council can do that. But it's just, tends to be a significant both public action and.
Several months ago, I think council made it clear we wanted full enforcement, so I think that's what we need, is full enforcement, period.
Well, I would disagree. At the time, there were 3 houses that we wanted to take action on, and somebody help me out with this if I need it. But we talked about going and enforcing, using council to do that, and it was a period of, we were testing that out.
Correct.
So we did give a blanket, yes, let's go after those 2 houses?
There were 2 that were ultimately filed.
Okay.
So we're clear though, by charter, we're a manager-run city. And by charter, under Section 7, the manager is responsible for all those duties. Our duty as council is to supervise the manager. So I do not want a situation set up where the manager in any way is abdicating his duties under charter to us, and in any way we are violating charter by taking on duties that are the manager's duties.
Well, I think that we definitely can talk about that and have a very clear understanding moving forward that if we want to give that ability to Marcus, between Marcus and legal, then we'll all have that same
And
conversation.
whether settlement authority would follow, because we
Yes.
certainly always come to city council for settlement authority. If city council is talking about delegating that as well, we need clear instructions,
Well,
so.
settlement authority is different, I agree with you. What I have a hard time right now is, this is 2 years old. These are, I'm gonna stop for a second, because this is burning a lot of the public's time. To get this tonight, when I've been seeking this information for 6 weeks, Councilmember Shipper said I gave too tight a deadline. I went back. July of 2022 was the first email asking for accountability for enforcement. So I am frustrated that not only have 6 weeks of requests for information, okay, not only going back, if you remember, September 1, when I sent the email and copied council on asking for accountability on enforcement and the process, going back to July of 2022, that you never contacted me after my May 21 email specifically stating, One, I need to know you didn't make public comments blaming council for not enforcing. Two, I wanted to know the answers of why enforcement hadn't occurred, why it was broken. There was a whole list. To have a manager not report back to any council member that's asking for information prior to meetings, especially when at the 3 prior public meetings, that information was clearly requested. I have said it before, council has heard me, I've said it to you, Mr. Pesha. Don't try to surprise me. Don't give me something at the last minute and expect me right here tonight to get this for the first time and be able to in any way verify whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. We had talked about, maybe there's confusion, I thought tonight was somewhat of a work session. The mayor talked about the last meeting, council being able to give input into what the process was, which I thought was a good idea. When you give us information the night of the meeting, there is no way possible that any of us can read, digest, assimilate, analyze, or give feedback. It's word soup. And when we are talking about how this affects the budget, confidence in whether we think the budget is right, which again, in my email going back to May 21st, which you ignored, said, I need to know how you justify a full-time salary being put on when we have issues from a planning commission where we had staff saying there weren't resources in time, but they were responsible for enforcement and they hadn't conducted enforcement. So I need to know why we're going to put a full-time position in, and have we dealt with the fact that the people whose positions the duties that was supposed to be done, didn't do it. Now I've got 2 people who didn't do duties under what they were supposed to do, and I'm asking the taxpayer to pay another person for a full-time duty. I don't know if it's the right thing to do because you haven't given any answers to council to analyze prior to making a decision as to whether this is a legitimate budget we're going to look at or whether this is a legitimate program. Citizens out here have been complaining for 2 years and nothing's been done. Every resource that you identified, we have had for those 2 years. And there's no explanation why management hasn't made sure those resources have been applied before tonight. And this is no disrespect to you, Councilman Shippers. I know you weren't at the one other meeting. I've been asking for this information, and if this just got done tonight, I'm sorry, you failed as a manager. If for 2 years and for the past 6 weeks, you not responding to me results in this that was just done today, and it was just finished last night, that's a failure, in my opinion. That's a complete failure.
May I continue with the presentation?
I'll let you complete it. I feel like we're wasting our time. We felt it was wasted at the last
do
meeting.
not.
I disagree.
Please, gallery,
Yeah,
no,
stop.
please don't do that. I want to give the staff the opportunity to do their presentation that they worked incredibly hard on. We
Why just
asked them-
this last few days? Why hasn't this
Steve,
happened?
we want to move forward. We want to be able to have that enforcement. We want to have the understanding of that enforcement. And I believe we need to look forward rather than continuing to look backwards.
We have to not ignore, as a council, failures. If there's an issue, if really for 2 years we had to wait for this that was done in 3 days, there is a complete failure.
So I disagree that nothing's been done because I have been in sessions with you, closed sessions, in which we were informed as to the actions being taken and multiple sessions, and there have been multiple actions taken according to our policy, according to the process through which the actions were taken. We agreed to follow legal's advice multiple times to take action if we're talking about short-term rentals, and action has been taken. It has followed the process. I think there is a misunderstanding as to what enforcement looks like, and that enforcement that has been happening comes through letters from legal, like is shown here. If they don't comply, another letter. We have filed lawsuits. for people that have not complied. This is enforcement. So to say that nothing has happened, there has been no enforcement, is really misleading and untrue. Because all along, all through every step of the way, since we first asked for this issue to be enforced, we have been getting information about the enforcement that is taking place. Was it
We've
enough?
gotten
Excuse me, please. Was it enough? Perhaps not. Because there's still things going on. I think the changes here, when we were in our budget sessions, where we were planning the budget, where we were learning what the budget was, and we said, what do you need? And then we offered money. I look at Juanita's list of things to do, and to give one person the job to take all that other stuff away so that she can do that job, because we have expressed that it's really important for us to do that. That's in the 2025 budget that you refused to pass. So if we're so worried about getting enforcement, then let's give the city the tools they need to do the kind of job that you want to do. I don't know why this is news to you, that this is the process, because in our sessions, when we have done this process, you were there, I was there, I learned this process. This is not the first time I'm seeing this. This is the first time I'm seeing this on paper, but this process has been explained to us over and over again. And anytime anybody has asked me, I have explained this process, that we need to go through the legal channels. And unfortunately, it does not happen overnight.
There
It
has
takes
been no one
time.
accountable. There has not been a direct process. I disagree with you respectfully, councilperson. And the reason that I respectfully disagree is the public out there that's made the complaints and come to meeting after meeting after meeting saying, why hasn't anything been done? Or being told that they can't have someone go out to their house. So I disagree with you completely that there's been a clear process, because the public clearly has lost trust in us. They do not see us making sure that the city's being managed properly, or that the staff's being managed properly by the manager, because we're 2 years in and we have the same problems we had before.
When people ask you, do you explain what the process is? Or, when people get a hold of you and say, what is happening? Do you say, well, there are several suits in place, that we are working on this? Do you tell them that? Or do you just, I understand that that there are other issues at play, and that the whole community development department, that there are issues with that, and I understand that, and I understand that there's zoning issues that are of concern. But to publicly attack our hardworking staff in this meeting and others, I find, I see it as grandstanding, and I find it very disturbing. And
It's
when I
your
look
job.
at, excuse me, it is not my job to publicly attack staff.
There's no publicly
And if I
attack, it's
look
holding
at,
accountable.
excuse me, if I look at the things that our agreements that we agree on, I am shaken, because first of all, it violates the charter for us to go after executive staff members as council members. That is not our job. And to then put pressure on the city manager to change how he manages staff as a city council member, we can work with the city manager, but when we directly attack other staff members, in my opinion, we are in violation. And it is not good for the community. It is not good for us. And it is not good for the people who work so hard for us and do this work day in and day out, while people are out with injuries and illness that occurred on the job. So if things didn't happen really quick while Mike Coy was doing it, it was because he got hit by a car and was out for months and months and months. If things are a little slow right now, it's because another staff member's husband was in a serious accident, seriously disabling
Councilmember
accident.
Shippers,
et
let's
cetera.
stop playing the histrionic card.
Excuse me, histrionic card?
Yes. We had members of the public here in the past 3 meetings talking about concerns that they had, complaints they have that hadn't been answered by the mayor, which it's not the mayor's job to do, but they had gone to the mayor because the manager or other people had not handled those. That is the management of the city. That is a failure. That's not
Councilmember King,
picking on people.
I need to interject because I directly approached that gentleman at our last meeting and asked him whom he called on staff. And he acknowledged he didn't call anybody on staff, that he had contacted the
We
mayor.
can
or he
both
thought he
talk to
contacted-
Doug Moore again, but that was one of his problems, which was the weekend, by the way, which his flow chart wasn't followed, that there were illegal rentals at a house, and it was the manager's position. We couldn't send a police officer or anybody else out to investigate that. So it's not, I want change, I want accountability. I think we have to find out, why has it taken 2 years with people sitting here with complaints going unanswered when we've had these resources at our disposal? And it's not picking on staff people when someone stands up and says, I don't have the capacity, resources, or time to do that, when that was in their job description. And when that's said, then it goes back. I'm not attacking that staff person. I have no say about them being hired, fired, anything. But then I have to ask, what happened with management? What did management do about that? That's what I did do in 2 emails, and I've been ignored and not gotten any answers. So I want you to know I'm not attacking staff, but I am saying there needs to be accountability. I've asked for answers. I haven't gotten them. The public's asked for answers. They haven't gotten them. And it hasn't been a week or 2 weeks. It hasn't been 6 weeks. It's been a year. It's been 2 years. And it goes back to my first evaluation of the manager, which you were part of. And all 6, I have said, we are not seeing accountability in management. And the public is losing faith. And that's our job, councilperson. That is our job, is to make sure that the manager we have here is carrying out the duties as required by charter. That's our only job.
If I may, I would just say that I hear you. I have heard you all along, but I will say that I don't necessarily agree with all of it. So, and we can do that as professionals. We can agree to disagree. And what we're trying to accomplish here is for people to clearly understand our code enforcement. And the importance of this meeting this evening was not so much to share what we already know with the council, but to make that information available to the public. You know, is it better for the public to come to a council meeting, take the opportunity at public comment, and speak to the whole council? Or is it better for them to call the city office? We need to give them every avenue to be heard. At our last public meeting, I was called out for somebody that said they called me personally 4 times. No one ever called me 4 times. And so I'm just going to say I would provide my personal cell phone number to anyone in this community so that they can be heard. I don't think that's necessary, but I think all of us are willing to do that. And so what I'm asking is to allow the staff to continue this presentation so that the general public understands the code enforcement that is going on. It has been going on. Is there room for improvement? Yeah, I think there is room for improvement. And communication is one of the things I think we have room for improvement. I want to look forward, and I want the public to feel heard. I want the council to feel heard. I want the staff to feel supported. And I'll just stop there. Because we need to pass a budget tonight, and I don't want our budget to be held hostage because of blight or because of enforcement. If we don't pass the budget tonight, we are going to be not in compliance with our ordinance. We are going to put the city operations at risk of putting our employees on furlough July 1st because we don't have a budget. People are unhappy right now because there's cars sitting in a yard or people aren't mowing their lawns. What if they don't have the opportunity to even call or expect an answer at the other end of the phone for an emergency that they might have? We can't put our community in that situation because we can't agree on enforcement. I believe we can agree on enforcement moving forward. I think that all of this is great conversation, but I concur with what Councilmember Shippers said, and I could never, in good conscience, sit in this council chambers and direct negative comments and call for resignment of city employees. I could never in good conscience do that. I could never in good conscience talk to people the way that some of the people have been talking to our city staff. We all want to be treated the way that we treat other people. And we need to be accountable. I don't disagree with you there. I believe we are being accountable. Are we perfect? No. No, we're not perfect. But we can learn from each other. And we can take this opportunity to be a better community. Today I was sitting in a statewide conference in our community. And I sat in different sessions. And I have to tell you, the keynote speakers to the conference today, I sat in that room and I was so inspired when they shared their experiences about Cadillac. These are people that are here from all over the state of Michigan. What are they going to read in the paper tomorrow morning? What are they going to see on TV tonight?
Tough decisions being made.
Yeah. But there was a picture painted of Cadillac today by the hard work that happened between the city, the Visitors Bureau, MSU Extension, and those people are in our community, and they are amazed at what we've done here. I don't want to air our dirty laundry to these people who have come to our community to learn what we do really well. They chose to come here. And I know we don't always have to agree with one another, but I can't agree with this attacking each other and speaking to each other the way that we're speaking to each other. We have trust, respect. Where are all those things? We need to remember those things when we have to make tough decisions. We can still do it and respect one another. The staff can still trust us even when we have to make difficult decisions. But they're not going to trust us if they feel like they're being attacked. And so I'm just going to stop talking and give other council members the opportunity to talk if you'd like to, or we can continue with the staff's presentation that they worked so hard on. Go ahead. Yes.
I will do my best to speed it up, so I apologize being long-winded. Under the short-term rental complaint diagram, a couple of key points under considerations that I want council to take a look at are regarding adjustments to our zoning code and our codes. We are looking at adding a new ordinance or amending our zoning code ordinance that would make listing of a short-term rental property in a zone that's prohibited. So if you have a property that is, let's just say in the R1 zone, and you're listing it online somehow, some way in a newspaper or anywhere as a short-term rental, with this code change that would result in a municipal civil infraction and would therefore give the city some additional teeth. As I also mentioned, with the property off of Pine Street, just last week, it was brought again to our attention that that property was still online, being listed as an available rental. As I was commenting, this was now embarking on the third letter of enforcement coming out of legal. And we did send our development director, along with a civil standby from the police department, to try to make contact. There was nobody there at the time. However, we are going to try again, and we have looked online, and we know when that property shows that it's available and when it shows that it isn't available. So while it did show it wasn't available yesterday, maybe it was just bad luck. Nobody was there or nobody answered the door. So we'll certainly try again. And I think thinking about our meeting on Monday, we'll add on the agenda that item, or even a part of a closed session. Just moving forward, and again, I'm going to try to move a little quicker, but spending a little bit of time. The next one, zoning code violations, and some of the more sensitive issues happening in town right now are essentially non-compliance with planning commission's special use permit conditions that have been set forth as a part of approval of site plans. There aren't many, but there's a couple that are out there that we're still dealing with. And so, as I mentioned before, the format is really similar. A complaint's received, and you can read for yourselves how how a complaint would come in. These are just examples. Obviously, it would be investigated. We would then initiate enforcement using BSNA. We would have a letter that goes out, which in these other instances, we have had letters going out. And so I think it's important to also mention that it's not as if we haven't done anything. It's not as if there hasn't been any attempts to enforce. There have been. So a letter would go out detailing what the violations are, what the allegations are, and essentially giving time frame for a remedy. The attempt is to get voluntary compliance. The attempt would be to have them come in and essentially work out a plan for compliance. That would work. If that still should fail, we do have penalties and citations detailed under Chapter 46 of our code, and we would also certainly engage with the city attorney, to determine next steps. For instance, if it's a violation of a special use permit, a next step could be rescinding of that special use permit. If it's a violation of a planned unit development or a PUD, might be a little bit trickier, but again, we would engage our law firm and go that route as well. Similar to the last one, there's some other considerations that we listed just to provide a little bit more framework to it. It's not just an administrative process, especially if we're talking about having to rescind a permit. That would have to go back in front of a public body, a public board. Inoperable vehicle complaints, that's something that you'd find under Chapter 8 of our city code. You'd also find it under the property maintenance code, under Chapter 16. This is an item that would more directly fall under our code enforcement officer, Juanita. Excuse me. Complaints for this item, similar to the others, can come in a myriad of ways. But as I commented in my opening remarks after I was talking about accountability, the code enforcement remodeling of the program switches to a more robust, proactive program where instead of, our enforcement officer primarily only working part-time on this, now it becomes full-time, but also primarily working a lot on complaints that come in, with this new responsibility, we'll be out there more actively looking for it. So, maybe a complaint came in, or maybe we found it while out in the field. This one again is I'm going to use the word muddy, but the first thing what we would do would be to initiate enforcement through a letter that would be mailed to the owner of the property and or the tenant who's ever there. We will provide a 5-day deadline to comply. On the sixth business day after that letter, we'll obviously check to see if there's compliance. If there isn't, we'll be issuing a municipal civil infraction citation, as well as looking at towing and or abating. Who pays for it? How does that happen? Well, we'll be obviously looking at charging for those affiliated or associated costs. And similar to what we do when it comes to, tall grass or lawn and weed issues, if those are not reimbursed, then we'll lien it against the property. So it becomes a part of the property tax. And again, this diagrams a lot of what we're doing already today. Very similar lawn and weed complaint. I'm taking words right out of the code. That includes brush and weeds and clippings and stumps and other related things. It's in Chapter 8 of our city code. Again, this would be under Juanita. Starts with a letter. We always want to get voluntary compliance if possible. If we don't get that letter, day after, we go out to check for compliance. If it's not complied, we send not complied with. This is what we currently do. We send a work order to the Department of Public Works. They will schedule and complete whatever the mowing or the clearing is. We bill for that service. If it's not paid, we then lien the property taxes. And again, this just diagrams what the current practice is. What we aim to improve on regarding this practice and frankly all the others is by having that full-time person in the field will be more proactive in finding these and not as reliant on reports coming in. Blight. I think that switched. Yeah. Again, under Chapter 8 of our code, junk, ashes, building materials, and other such things. Again, a very similar process as you guys just heard me iterate for the last two. It all falls under the Chief Code Enforcement Officer, which would be Juanita. And if things are not complied with, Department of Public Works will go out, clean it up. We bill the property. If the property owner doesn't pay, we then lien the property taxes. Point of reference, sometimes these properties, unfortunately go back on taxes. Sometimes they get bought. Sometimes they don't get bought and go to auction. Sometimes they don't sell at auction and then they go to a salvage auction. And at a salvage auction, at times then some of these fines or fees get waived. We'll try to do what we can, working with the county to see if properties that we have liens on may not get waived. But it's just part of the beast in a sense. Oops, excuse me. This chart is something that you'll see, or frankly hear later on tonight when we're talking about the appropriations ordinance that's before you. But I'm going to try to walk through the handout that was in the packet as well, just simply titled Code Enforcement Budget Analysis. And so the current, under Code Enforcement Officer, the current budget for Code Enforcement Department in the general fund appropriates sufficient funds to cover about a quarter of the salary of Juanita, who's currently performing those activities on a part-time basis as a part of her overall role. And the remaining pieces of that salary are split between the police department, and Public Works Department accordingly. Public Works is picking up the yeoman's share of that. The plan is of July 1, and the way that we've scripted it within the budget, based upon, again, the work sessions that we had earlier this spring, the plan is of July 1 is to make, Juanita a full-time code enforcement officer. And the code enforcement department will then cover 80% of that salary of the position, and other duties are going to end up being, as I mentioned earlier, reassigned to other staff. The police department will still cover the remaining 20%. Juanita will still be, as she is still certified to work with special law enforcement related systems, she's still the best person to help back up the police department's administration lobby. So the budget impact is broken up into two areas to equal the $25,000 adjustment, or I shouldn't say adjustment, but the $25,000 addition to the budget that we had recommended to City Council. So the first $5,000, and the justification is additional compensation to account for increased responsibilities, and also to help with other staff and increased responsibilities, that they are going to have as they absorb other work duties that Juanita is going to be giving up. Again, just mentioning quickly, DPW-related activities, special event coordination are probably the two biggest. A part-time employee could also be utilized to help offset all of that, and we just don't know exactly today, how much of that part-time employee, how much a part-time employee will be needed, but we're budgeting for it, we're planning for it. And so you'll then see the $20,000 impact. Talks about how employees will receive small increases along with their additional duties, and it then creates the ability for us to bring on a part-time employee paid at $15 an hour, working essentially 2 days a week, 48 weeks a year, will make up the balance of the budget request. Again, you'll see this as a part of the appropriations request this evening. The note is, the initial proposed budget didn't get into all that detail. It didn't get into, it had the $25,000 out there as a placeholder, but it didn't get into which actual fund line items or departments it was going to come out of and go into, and that's what this chart tries to show. Sorry, my voice is a little hoarse. Promise we're almost done. Legal update. I felt that this was important to continue to iterate. This is a moving target, and I, without a doubt, Councilmember King, take your concerns to heart. Without any shadow of a doubt, and I understand that there is perception, belief that we haven't done anything, and maybe we are working too slow. I will say that we have codified the development director's opinions regarding short-term rentals. Just as a for instance, I'm not trying to open up or pull a Band-Aid off or something, but we that all took time. Went through a variety of public hearings. We had public forums on short-term rentals, and ultimately that, through a host of different meetings and conversations, all public, we all agreed, hey, let's just take what we're doing now and codify that as just one example. But looking at what we're looking at today, City Council graciously set the public hearing for that first asterisk regarding an ordinance that'll make violations of blight provisions, municipal civil infractions, our prosecutor, city attorney who serves as our city prosecutor is here this evening as well, I think, still?
Yes.
And understands, the challenge with all of this and, recognizes that prosecuting these as municipal civil infractions would perhaps be a better path to go down versus looking at everything as a misdemeanor. And so this ordinance that we just introduced last week, in which we have a public hearing set forth, will do that. The next one I mentioned just frankly a minute or two ago about an ordinance to amend the zoning code that'll make the advertisement of short-term rentals and prohibited use districts a municipal civil infraction. This will really help us a lot. We hear, hey, somebody's renting that house. That's a short-term rental. Well, it makes it hard to just go right to a lawsuit if we don't have something a little bit more tangible. And that's where, especially if we could find the advertisement right off the bat, that allows us to write a civil infraction ticket. That does have to go to the Planning Commission first. They'll have a public hearing, and then their consideration gets remanded up to City Council. City Council will have a public hearing, and then, assuming that it's approved in the affirmative, that'll provide another tool in our toolbox.
Marcus, could I jump in real
Yeah,
quick to amplify
absolutely.
that a little bit?
Sure.
Because sometimes I think people hear municipal civil infraction and they think, oh, it's just a ticket, it's just a fee. With a municipal civil infraction, the district court also has the authority to issue an injunction, so an order prohibiting that use, without going through the much lengthier process of a circuit court lawsuit, which is what has been done with other short-term rentals in the city within the last year. So it's a more abbreviated process that still has that injunction available. So it's not just a slap on the wrist fine, but an actual court order that would prohibit that use if it was found in the city's favor.
Thank you. I appreciate that. But we're not stopping there. I mean, the code book is very lengthy. As I mentioned earlier, there's a lot of areas in the code that might need to get tweaked as appropriate. Also, outside of the code book, working with the fire marshal, looking at maybe tweaking and creating a more robust build out of our condemned housing registry that we have. Didn't mean to skip over it, but establishment of a violations bureau, that is something that would be done by ordinance, and that's something, frankly, that Mike Homey, our other city attorney, we've been kind of going back and forth about whether or not we need one and the benefits, the pros and the cons, and so we're not quite ready yet to make a recommendation to City Council, but it's just something else that is happening in the background regarding this topic. I realize that this last slide that I have is kind of out in a vacuum to a degree, but just nicknamed it facts and stats, and looking at our BSNA program, and I have to thank Owen going into it and pulling some of this information out along with Adam earlier today. Inspections conducted in 2024 were 153. As you could see, a lot of them, most of them were under the rental inspection program. We had 48 other code enforcement types of inspections conducted. 2023, we had 585, 459 rental, 126 other code enforcement. 2024, again, 2024 year to date. Sorry if I botched that. 2024 year to date under enforcement actions. So far, we've been able to pull out 57 enforcement actions were initiated. So far in 2024, 12 were grass and weed related, 10 abandoned vehicles, 10 blight, 4 rental, and 21 other. 2023, in all of 2023, we had 163 enforcements initiated. 36 were grass and weeds, 8 abandoned vehicles, 22 blight, 66 rental, 30 other. I thought that the stats were interesting. About 47% of them were closed, and after compliance, 8.6% were closed after abatement, 9.2% were closed with no violations found, and 57 still remain open. Most of those are rentals that are not registered with us, and we do have a rental registration program that is mandatory. Short-term rentals, 2024 year-to-date, we mentioned how we had 2 lawsuits that were filed, and we honestly had good success with both of them, and they both settled, and the costs, at least, knock on wood somewhere here, were relatively negligible at about $5,600. With anything that we do, whether it's enforcement related, whether it's development related, because we're working on plans, obviously there's a cost to everything that we do. And those costs can go up, those costs can go down, and this is, the costs that I have, today. So again, I apologize if I was long-winded in the presentation. Again, Councilmember King, I absolutely heard your concerns, and I did my best to try to address them publicly about accountability in the beginning of my presentation. I understand if you and I need to meet offline, but
You did not respond to a council member asking for information to be able to be reviewed and analyzed before this meeting. And I think that's a violation in my opinion, that's a violation of your duties. Any council person requesting information and report to be able to consider the budget, which is exactly why I told you I wanted that information, was to be able to analyze it ahead of time, and to be completely ignored, I, in my opinion, believe that's a direct violation of your duties, and I don't think any one of us here should be ignored.
just wanted to say thank you to council for your patience.
Do I get to ask
And
you a couple
certainly,
of questions?
yes, I'm just wrapping up. This was just my last line.
On
And
to
thank you to
something
staff.
entirely different.
Yes, sir.
So the work from Juanita will trickle down on Abby and Danielle and maybe a part-time person.
No, not necessarily. So Juanita will be the code enforcement officer, directly
What she's currently doing now.
in part,
Okay.
just a very small part.
Okay.
Directly responsible, now let me just go back to it, directly responsible for essentially blight types of activities.
Okay.
Blight being, junk in the yards, lawn, weeds, tall grass, inoperable vehicles, things of that nature.
The various things she's doing right now,
Other than that,
are
Right.
going to trickle down to other people and a part-time employee.
Not quite, but we're close.
Oh,
so
boy.
yeah, we're close. So the other two employees, Danielle and Abigail, work in community development. Community development is the department that's primarily responsible for zoning-related enforcement issues and topics and things that would fall under that sort of cone of expertise. So, when it comes to, whether or not, property X is in compliance with a condition under a special use permit, that isn't something that Juanita may even necessarily be privy to, unless she somehow, caught it in conversation or dialogue. That would be something that people in the community development department would understand has to happen, understand what the time frame is of when those activities should happen, and then would be responsible for enforcing that code. The part-time person that we're looking at budgeting for would be responsible for picking up the other activities that Juanita is going to be stripped away of.
That's what I want.
Like
That's what I
events
wanted to know.
coordinator or
Yeah.
Yes.
that other stuff.
Yeah.
And looking at your flow chart,
Which one?
all of them. The first two, there's no time frames. I like the fact that the other three, 5-day deadline to comply, 6 business days after the letter. But then even when you get in a code enforcement workflow, violation says yes. Then it goes over and you get 5-day deadline. I would have liked to have seen a time frame between violation and initiate enforcement. Like, you've got 3 days to initiate enforcement. I mean,
Well, I think that's good feedback, Brian, and that's
that's-
the purpose of this discussion, this is the staff's best description of it as it exists, but we need to communicate and
That way we
see
don't-
what else we would like to be
We
a
want to
part of
keep it
it.
moving quickly as possible. Don't let them stack up on somebody's desk, which is easy to do.
Right.
That's the only input I had.
No, I appreciate
Even,
that. Thank you.
you know,
And you're specifically referring to the short-term and zoning.
yeah, I would even put a time frame for the employee to do the following, whatever
Yeah.
steps they had.
Yep.
And move it along quickly so we don't get clogged up and they don't, it's easy to get things piled up on your desk. That's the only thing I had.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Robert, did you have anything?
I had a question about the weekend issue. How's our code enforcement officer employed? Hourly salary, on call. How does this work on Saturday or Sunday
So,
when we get a short-term SDR call?
Full-time employee that does not work on the weekends, works Monday through Friday, just as all prior code enforcement officials that we've had here. It doesn't mean that if there's something of urgency that gets reported in during a weekend, we can't look at having another staff member come out, especially if it's something that's causing a disruption. It would likely be
the
somebody through
police.
the police department.
I had one more thing that maybe is a small council discussion, but I know with the popularity of No Mow May, and with the gentleman who came and talked about the abundance of yards not being mowed before Memorial Day, if that was a cultural type issue where people aren't doing it on purpose, and if we need to discuss and message whether we are for that or against that and why.
Don't mow May.
Tell people that.
We don't like that.
I mean, we need to tell people because the public information is encouraging it. And if we're going to start fining people for not mowing their lawns in May, we should be very
Let
clear.
them know about it in April.
Yeah, and that's a popular topic right now. So I
I
think
would like to have a discussion about no mow May, not.
I've got too many neighbors that have don't May, June, July, and August.
Well, June, July, and August is another thing.
I guess May's not a big deal,
But
We can add that to a council agenda.
Okay, cool. Good. Okay. Well, thank you,
Thank you.
Marcus, for that presentation, and I certainly think that there will be ongoing discussion
Of course.
about code enforcement, and, yeah.
I apologize.
No, it's okay.
With the rental unit compliance too, as we look at those numbers, we just have 2 years worth of stats, and I don't really know what the consequences of those types of numbers. But is that approaching a problem number? I mean, when you're looking at the bulk of the outstanding complaints is rental units not registering.
That is a big number, actually,
I mean,
57.
we catch them when they're coming in for the water bill. Generally, that's how we know. I don't know if these people, if we've confirmed these, or if these are just water bills that are listed at a different address that we flag but don't quite know. But I was kind of wondering that, because if they're not registered, are we still inspecting them even though they're not registered?
Yeah, so unregistered rentals, most of the time we're identifying those through either a complaint or a utility bill. It typically starts with a shut-off or something, and then once they're identified, we've got a standard throughput to them. It kind of ebbs and flows over the years. Normally we run about 350 or so rental inspections per year. The reason our numbers are so high right now, like approaching that 500 mark, is because COVID, that shut everything down. So it's still a little bit.
We're behind.
Yeah, well, we were almost 3 years behind, and now we're less than a year behind. And there's also been a big influx of new property owners in the area. A lot of folks have either divested and sold back to owner occupied, or they've got we've seen good attraction from out of area owners too that just came in and they're not used to our stuff. So then we realize, oh shoot, this person's got 5 or 6. So it's kind of a unique time, but I'm starting to see those come down because I'm the one that's following through on all those, and currently those are all civil infraction, so we're able to move those through relatively quickly, and we're hoping as we explore this violations bureau to actually accelerate that and simplify that for staff using our current tech and personnel we've got.
Thank you.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah.
Cool.
Okay. Again, as we move forward, I think that we all are going to be committed to better communication and, looking at those stats and raising concerns, asking questions, so that the perception doesn't remain or doesn't become that we're not enforcing. So at this time, if we could go on to the next item on the agenda. Marcus, would you like to?
Thank you, Mayor and members of the City Council. Again, I apologize that my voice is cracking. It's when I talk too long that happens.
Here, do you need more?
No, I'm good. The next item is the consideration of adoption of the ordinance establishing the General Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2025. Owen, if you wouldn't mind, please reiterating the chart and the slight adjustment and, where we're at with that.
Sure. So one of the advantages of doing it tonight versus a couple weeks ago is now that the plan is in place, is we can adopt a budget that includes appropriations as they are in the new plan. And so the only change to the budget ordinance versus the way that it was 2 weeks ago is on the first page of the ordinance, where it talks about general fund expenditures. Everything else in the ordinance is the same, and this represents the changes that were shown in the summary chart. So the city clerk treasurer department is $20,000 more than it was 2 weeks ago. The police department is $2,500 less than it was. The public works is $38,000 less, and the funds have been added where it says economic development and assistance. The state of Michigan chart of accounts puts the blight prevention / code enforcement activities within an activity number that falls within economic development and assistance. So that's where that budget is, and so that's higher than it was. The total expenditures of $9,195,200 is exactly the same as it was before. So again, we had placed that based on the initial work sessions and discussions. We had done the placeholder of an additional $25,000, knowing that council had offered additional resources to improve, to bolster the program. We put that in there as we worked out how that would go. Now that we're kind of at this point, this is appropriating the funds into the cost centers that they'll be spent from with the new plan.
Thank you. Laura, can you provide just an overview of what needs to happen this evening, why it needs to happen, and what would be, I spoke to it earlier, but what would be the results if it doesn't happen?
Certainly. The city charter requires that the budget be approved and appropriations for the next year be made no earlier than the 10th of May and no later than the last day of May. So it would be a charter. I doubt you're going to have a meeting tomorrow. There wouldn't be much time for 18 hours notice for another special meeting. So really tonight is the night to approve it, or else the city council will be in violation of the charter. And state law requires that a charter have a provision for the adoption of a budget, so that charter requirement is quite in line with Michigan law. If there's not a budget adopted, then in the new fiscal year, the city will have no authority to spend money. That means no authority to pay any city employees for any services for any of the public employees, public servants in this room, or essential services that are provided.
Okay, thank you.
Discussion?
Pardon?
Discussion?
Sure.
If anybody wants to know tonight, I will not be voting for the budget. For 6 weeks, I've asked for specific information so that I could analyze and interpret whether we have a reasonable and responsible budget, especially when we're talking about the taxpayers for this new position. I'm not holding up the budget. The manager not responding to my emails or requests for information for over 6 weeks, that's just on this issue. But since September, since my last detailed request for information, since July of 2022, we cannot go on and simply say we're not going to look at the past and ask why we were broken. If we don't ask why we are broken and hold accountability for being broken, it's going to repeat itself. And we have been, I've said this in our meetings, we have been suffering from less than mediocrity, striving to be mediocre, and failing. We need to do what we need to do. We need to communicate as a council. A manager needs to respond to his council. You can't hide from me.
I'm not hiding.
I have always said, don't lie to me, don't surprise me, don't hit me with information when we have to make a major decision and ask me to assimilate it. I asked for this information way ahead of time. You chose not to give it to me. I do not feel my fiscal responsibility is being met if I vote yes when you're telling me, don't worry, we have two people who our staff said were responsible for enforcement and didn't do that. I'm going to create a full-time position over here. But don't ask me why this money over here went neglected, because those are enforcement duties. I pointed out the problem that going back to last summer at public hearings, at public meetings, when we were told by staff, we can handle the short-term rental. We have all the resources in the world. We have no problem doing it. And then that staff member says 2 weeks ago, I don't have the capacity or the ability to do it. I fiscally have to question whether this budget is being properly put forth to us, whether it will be properly managed, and I can't do it when you don't give me the information I asked for. So it's based on all of that. I'm not trying to hold up the budget, but I'll be darned if I'm going to be held hostage or the rest of the council is going to be held hostage because the manager refuses to provide information, which is his duty under the 5th section of Section 7 of the Charter.
Robert, do you have anything to add to the discussion?
I would add, let's see, I guess, I don't really think it's a mystery to me when we say, if I were to look backwards, I think the mistake the city made was not replacing the code enforcement officer. I think fixing that mistake will probably go a long way towards remedying the situation. That's what when I ran for election, like Brian did just a little while ago, and we talked to a lot of people, a lot of them wondered if we went wrong by not replacing the code enforcement officer. They noticed the lawns weren't getting cut. Some people were worried that short-term rentals weren't being dealt with. And I think since that election, just in the last 5 months, I think we've made progress on short-term rentals. I think we're winning the battle to shut those down in zones that they weren't allowed. I think the code enforcement officer is the second half of that solution. So, I definitely, we told, we did it in our work session. We gave the city a pile of money and said, come up with a plan for it. We picked 25, and the plan. It would have been nice, as Councilmember King said, to review the budget portion, to see how that money was going to be distributed, not at the last hour or even past the hour at this point in the special meeting. So I definitely get that point. But I will be voting for the budget, and if the budget vote fails, my next motion will be to remove the code enforcement appropriation, the $25,000 that we threw at Marcus, and then pass it that way. So that's where I am.
And just to go along with Councilmember Engels, it's not the 25,000 that's in the budget that's as a question. It's the management of the funds and enforcement and whether they've been addressed and whether by adding that is a good thing or whether there's an issue with the staff. So removing that still doesn't give me at least the financial questions, as you know, I've been asking for over 6 weeks. And I don't know if you, council member, can explain why the manager, because I sent all the council members my email requesting that information, why he wouldn't respond to that and give this information before.
Yeah, I can't explain that. I mean, I did read the email.
Can you get closer to the
Yes,
microphone?
you know,
so people can
I
hear?
did read the email, though, that you sent last time, the day after the meeting. You know, and I think initially I read your email. I read the first part. I read the second part. I wanted to know what was happening with the Pine Street house, you know, so I came in and I talked to the city manager. We talked about some things that were coming down the pike. We talked about making it a violation to be advertised as opposed to having to prove that any type of infraction was taking place. You know, the second part of the email, though, you know, I think, you know, when you say, you know, essentially in multiple different ways, fire the community director or resign yourself, you know, that I do think that makes it a little hard to deal with. I don't
say
think,
that, by the way, and I've said in all my emails going back to 2022, our job is not to manage the staff. That's the manager's job. But if the manager's not managing, our job is to hold him accountable. And part of holding him accountable is responding to requests for reports by council.
Thank you, Robert. Tia, did you have anything to add?
I don't. Well, just the one that saying fire the staff member or resign yourself is exactly what you're saying you're not doing. But that's all I'm going to say, and I don't want you to interrupt and respond. You've had plenty of time to talk. Brian.
I don't blame you for being upset, Mr. King. For a city manager not to respond to emails from a council person, that's almost a reason for dismissal. It's unheard of. I just can't imagine not being answered, let alone as many. We all saw them, as many as you had. I don't blame you for being upset. And I like Marcus, but it's thin ice. I mean, not responding to a council person, a basic question, ignoring him, not just one, how many? 3. And no answers. That's really bad. That's as bad as it gets as far as I'm concerned. I like Marcus. I personally like this guy. But you're skating on really thin ice. And as far as the budget, I worked for the city, and a lot of these people are my friends. So I have a hard time holding them hostage. So, you know, but you need to get this figured out, okay? You can't let this happen again. That's all I have to say.
I was about to ask Councilmember King. I did not respond to the correspondence he sent to me last week. Honest to God, I do not know what those other two
I can
messages
get them
are.
for you,
Yes,
and I
that's what was
always
gonna ask.
include the council,
And that's-
as the council knows. On
And that's
my
fine.
emails.
You know, I did not respond to the one from last week. Did not have a chance to respond to the one from last week.
That's knowing that the budget's coming up. That's knowing that a council member's asking for financial information to determine whether it's an appropriate budget to pass. And I don't care if there's a seminar in town. I don't care what's going on. That's more important than anything else.
Okay.
Don't disagree with you.
All right. Would someone entertain a motion to approve the budget that's been presented?
I will make a motion to approve the resolution to adopt the ordinance establishing General Appropriations Act for fiscal year 2025.
Support.
Councilmember King,
No.
Shippers,
Yes.
Allenboss,
The very reluctant yes. And better
Eng-
start answering his emails.
Ingalls,
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
Yes, motion carries. With that, we'll go ahead and adjourn.
Well, I have one more item.
Oh, you do?
I do, whether it's good of the order or whatever.
Okay,
is
they
part of
didn't
my
have
meeting.
good of the order on here, so, but go ahead.
Okay. I am going to propose a motion of no confidence in relation to the management of the city by Marcus Pescia, based on the fact of failure to respond to council, based on the fact of failure to address the enforcement issue in over a year and a half. I think that was dereliction of duty. I think based on the fact of refusal to deal with staff issues in a way, not me telling someone to get fired or not, but not dealing with them is a dereliction of duty.
I'll second it.
Councilmember Shippers,
No.
King,
Yes.
Ingalls,
No.
Allenboss,
Yes.
Mayor Folkins.
No. Motion doesn't carry.
I mean, I'm not sure that motion tells anybody anything that they couldn't have found by looking at the city manager reviews as well. Like you said, Steve, you've made a lot of the things that you've said here tonight clear in the last couple, as well as tonight. So,
And I want to remind council, we have a duty to manage, and it's not easy, and it's not saying mean things to people, council member Shippers. It's being a manager and telling hard truths and expecting performance and expecting ethical and high performance. We need to step it up. We have been less than mediocre as a council, in my opinion, and we have had management that's less than mediocre. And I ask the public to give me feedback. I'm happy to take the feedback, but I think it's time that the point is made.
Actually, if I might, rather than just one of us inviting that feedback, I would invite people to come to our meetings. And if in fact people feel that way, step up to that podium and speak to the entire council, because we're here to listen. I don't know that the rest of us have heard that same information, and so I'm not saying whether it did or it didn't happen. I'm concerned the rest of us aren't hearing that information. So I'm asking other people, if there are people out there that truly have these concerns, rather than it be hearsay, please come to our meetings and talk to the entire council. Thank you. T.I.?
I just want to say that I find it difficult to see multiple community meetings on these issues, multiple closed sessions, multiple discussions in open session, multiple correspondences with email, and other ways of describing what is happening as doing nothing for 2 years. We have had, how many of you have been to the meetings out at the other building? How many of you have had a chance to give your input and your feedback? And every step of the way we have pivoted based on the feedback that we are getting. And this has come from us, and it has come from the city staff. And it's crazy to think that nothing has happened and that duties have been derelicted over the past year or so, when an enormous number of things have occurred. And meetings and callbacks and correspondences. I would not have answered an email that demanded I fire somebody or resign. There comes a point when you just don't. I was looking back at some other accusations, for one, of not responding one time when Marcus wasn't here, and I found that email where he had actually responded to all of us. So if that wasn't good enough to respond to all of us so we would all be in the loop, I just find that hard to see as incompetent, dereliction of duty, or refusing to communicate with council. And that's all I have to say.
Did you have anything else, Brian?
Oh, I hope not.
Okay. Then I'm going to go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all.